She opened the door at 6:12 p.m., looked me dead in the eye, and said the birthday gift she wanted was for me to disappear, forever. I didn't scream. I logged the time like the nurse I once was and let my hands stop shaking before I moved. That night, I sent one line, "I'm respecting your wish," and began shutting the money doors she'd been walking through on my name. But that was only the first turn. Cameras, remember? Paper speaks. And the next 7 minutes in a glass room changed everything. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. It was my daughter Belle's 45th birthday, and I arrived a little early with a cake from her favorite bakery. $200 of butter and berries sat on my passenger seat, ribboned and perfect. For my only child, nothing felt too expensive. That has been my rule since the day she weighed 7 pounds and made me a mother. I parked at the curb in Round Rock, smoothed my blouse, tucked the receipt under the card in my purse, and told myself the same thing I used to tell anxious families in the ICU. Be kind, be brief, be steady. I rehearsed a simple wish, nothing that could be interpreted as a demand. If I kept it light and tidy, maybe the evening would behave. The walkway lamps glowed as I stepped onto the porch. I balanced the cake and pressed the bell. A small red ring lit. The doorbell camera. Always watching. Through the frosted oval, I saw her silhouette pause. The latch clicked. Belle opened the door just a crack, not wide enough for a welcome. Her eyes slid past me to the driveway, scanning for someone else, or for some imagined intrusion. "Oh," she said, flat as a countertop. I lifted the box a little. "Happy birthday. Belle, chocolate with strawberries, like when you were little." She didn't reach for it. She looked straight at me, expression tidy and untroubled. "You want to know the best gift?" she said. "The best gift would be if you just died." The word gift landed first. The rest came like a cold draft under the door. My body went very still. Then the old nurse in me took over. Time first, then pulse. 6:12 p.m. The wall clock inside the hall said so. The bell's red circle was lit. Tone, board, volume, conversational. Distance, 2 feet. Witnesses, only a lens. My fingers tightened around the handle, but my voice stayed calm. "I brought what you like," I said. "Because facts do not wobble." She shrugged a shoulder and let the door drift open a little more, enough for me to step in out of the heat without brushing her sleeve. "You didn't have to come," she added, as if I were a neighbor selling candles for a fundraiser. Inside, everything gleamed. The quartz island, the spotless sink, the curated bowl of lemons. Belle took the cake and set it near the faucet, as if it might drip. The candles remained sealed in their little box. The bakery card, a simple, "To Belly with love," tipped against the towel. Music played faintly from a speaker somewhere in the living room, a playlist of bright songs that asked nothing of anybody. "You didn't have to," she said, eyes on her phone. It sounded less like graciousness and more like a reminder that I was extra. "Of course," I answered, placing the card upright. "Happy birthday." She nodded without looking, the way people acknowledge a delivery. Pain wanted a stage. I denied it one. I inhaled, counted to 4, and made a quiet inventory. Exact words, placement of the cake, where the camera could see, whether anyone else was nearby. No movement from the hall. No small feet skidding on hardwood. I thought of the charge nurse I used to be, how we logged everything because memory is not an instrument to trust. I slid my phone from my purse and tapped a memo open with my thumb. 6:12 p.m., I whispered to myself, barely moving my lips. Statement at front door recorded by Cam. No escalation. I noted the smell of lemon cleaner, the faint clatter of ice in a glass somewhere, the angle of the box near the sink. "I'll let you get back to your party," I said. And I meant it. I wasn't going to teach my grandchildren what begging looks like. Belle gave a small, distracted smile that didn't reach anyone. "Sure," she replied, thumbs moving across her screen, already drafting the next thing that didn't include me. I stepped back along the tile, quiet as a nurse at shift change, and paused only to be certain the cake wouldn't topple. The candles had begun to soften in their box. I wished her well in a voice steady enough to be evidence. She turned away before the wish ended, which made the wish not smaller, but clearer. Outside, the evening heat loosened its grip. A neighbor across the street watered roses and pretended not to notice. I didn't wave. I lifted my phone and texted myself the sentence I'd need later. She said the best gift would be if I just died. 6:12 p.m. Front door. No adjectives. No questions. Only the spine of the moment. I unlocked the car, set my purse on the passenger seat where the cake had ridden so carefully, and closed the door gently so the scene behind me could go on pretending to be a party. The sky was the color of ripe peaches over the rooftops. Somewhere a sprinkler clicked on and off, precise as a metronome. The engine turned over on the first try. The dashboard clock read 6:19. I clicked my seatbelt and spoke my checklist aloud, a habit since the ICU. Respect, records, routine. Respect, no scenes, no retaliatory words. Records, the footage, the text, the receipt, the card. Routine, drive home, drink water, sleep, plan in the morning. I added one line to the memo I keep for myself whenever I have to face something hard. I won't explain, I will adjust. I looked once in the rearview mirror. The porch framed the door like a stage, but I decided not to give it another performance. The doorbell's red ring pulsed, then dimmed. A small, steady witness. I eased away from the curb and let the streetlights lead me toward the quiet I had earned. Tonight, I choose quiet over chaos. Go. By Tuesday evening, the house had gone back to its normal hum, the kind that's too quiet when you've lived alone long enough to notice every tick. The clock above my microwave flipped from 6:11 to 6:12 p.m., same minute as 2 nights ago. Same minute her words landed like a cold slap, and I wrote them down instead of screaming back. That tiny number on the clock felt like an anniversary already. I stood by the counter, phone face down, letting the second hand sweep once, twice. I told myself the same rule I'd used my whole career. Don't touch the wound before it closes. 48 hours, no calls, no texts, no explanations. The phone lit up anyway. The preview bubble pulsed like a heartbeat. Belle, can you take the twins Friday? No apology. No mention of Sunday. Just logistics. Like we were two strangers who shared a carpool. I stared at the screen long enough to see my reflection in the glass. Calm, lined, not surprised. My thumb hovered over reply, but the silence stretched. I made tea instead. The phone buzzed once more on the counter, then went still. She'd get her answer soon enough. I sat at the table, typed one line, and reread it out loud. I'm respecting your birthday wish. 10 words. Clear, adult, final. I didn't add honey, didn't add love. I pressed send, watched the blue bubble slide across the screen, and felt something inside me settle, like a bone clicking back into place. The phone vibrated almost instantly. 3 messages, then a 4th, then one of those long paragraphs you can sense without opening. I left them unread. Dignity doesn't require audience participation. Old habits took over. I opened the screenshot tool, caught the message chain from top to bottom, then exported the images into a PDF. I named it 2024-05-21-1815-1830 AS S2 text and saved it in the same cloud folder where I keep my medical records and tax returns. If you didn't document it, my first charge nurse used to say, it didn't happen. I wrote a short note in my journal app. Boundary established. No response required. There was comfort in the clicks and saves, in the little digital rituals that made chaos small enough to file away. At 7, I took my blood pressure like I always do, 118/72, steady. I sorted tomorrow's pills into their compartments, slipped on my sneakers, and walked 2 blocks around the cul-de-sac. The air smelled faintly of barbecue and cut grass. Neighbors waved from their driveways. I waved back, careful not to let the smile look forced. I didn't need to tell anyone what had happened. Some wounds, when left alone, heal cleaner. I didn't call a friend. I didn't pour a drink. I let the silence be medicine. Back home, I sat at the kitchen table again with a pen and a scrap of paper torn from the back of an envelope. 3 items. I wrote them in red ink. Joint, gate fob, mortgage clause, underlined each twice. Tomorrow. I'd start with the bank. After that, the homeowners association. The list looked small but heavy, like 3 stones you could skip across a lake if your arm were steady enough. I pulled out the folders I'd need. Old joint account statements, the HOA access form, the original mortgage contract I'd co-signed 15 years ago. They still smelled faintly of paper dust and time. I stacked them neatly on the chair by the door with tomorrow's outfit folded on top. At 8, I tapped the crescent icon on my phone. Do not disturb, 8 p.m. to 8 a.m. Only one contact, my neighbor. Clara was marked as emergency bypass. Everyone else could wait. I poured the last of the tea into the sink, rinsed the mug, and turned off the kitchen light. Before bed, I set my alarm for 8:00 a.m. and slipped the bank folder into my tote. My reflection in the window looked both older and newer, like a woman just beginning again. I whispered into the quiet, "You said you wanted me gone, Belle, so I'm going?" The digital clock blinked 9:15 p.m. I smiled at the number and decided it didn't matter. Tomorrow had its own timestamp waiting. By the time the morning sun spilled across my kitchen counter, everything I needed was already lined up in neat stacks. The folders from last night, joint, HOA, mortgage, waited beside my tote like disciplined soldiers. I brewed my coffee, black, poured half into a travel mug, and whispered my rule for the day. No speeches, only signatures. My phone stayed on Do Not Disturb, except for Clara next door, my designated emergency contact. I took a slow breath before stepping outside. For the first time in days, the air didn't taste like sadness. It tasted like direction. At the bank, the fluorescent lights hummed like they always do, bright and impersonal. The teller recognized me. Most of them do after all the years I've been a customer. But today I asked to speak directly with an account manager. When she arrived, crisp blazer and kind eyes, I slid my ID and folder across the counter. "I'd like to close a joint account," I said evenly. "For personal boundary reasons." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, but she nodded without asking more. I signed the form, requested a stamped confirmation letter and a PDF emailed to me before I left. The click of her keyboard sounded like a metronome keeping me calm. She handed me a card with her name, Heather, Senior Account Specialist, and a piece of paper stamped in red, closed. I checked my phone. The time read 10:43 a.m. I watched as the balance transferred into my personal checking account. The overdraft links were removed, and the online access tied to Belle's name was deleted. The sound of the rubber stamp echoed once more, firm and final. "Closure confirmed," Heather said softly, sliding the receipt toward me. I tucked the business card into my folder, smiled, and thanked her for her professionalism. No explanation was required. The paperwork spoke louder than any conversation ever could. From there, I drove to the HOA office. The building sat behind the same gates Belle once used to breeze through unannounced. Inside, the receptionist looked young enough to be one of my old ICU trainees. I placed my homeowner ID on the counter and said, "I need to revoke an access fob registered under my property." She pulled up the record. Belle's name flashed on the screen with the serial number of her key fob. "You're removing this one?" she asked. I nodded. "Yes, effective immediately." The system beeped once, a sharp little sound that meant the connection was gone. "There," she said, "revoked at 2:07 p.m. I signed the form, requested an emailed confirmation, and asked her to note the log. Access removed by owner. She handed me a printed receipt that smelled faintly of ink and toner. The gate icon on her screen flashed red before settling back to gray. For the first time in months, I felt the property line stretch back into something that was mine again. I left with a copy of the visitor policy and folded it neatly into the HOA folder before walking out into the Texas heat. I parked in a shady spot under a live oak and opened my lunch, half a turkey sandwich, apple slices, and a bottle of water. Nothing fancy, but enough. I chewed slowly, staring at the neat stack of paperwork on the passenger seat. I dictated a note into my phone. May 22nd, completed S3 and S4, both verified. Proceeding to mortgage, then, almost out of habit, I checked my blood pressure with the portable cuff I keep in my glove compartment. Steady. I said a quiet prayer for clarity and took one more sip of water. The loan office was next. Cool air conditioning met me as soon as the glass doors opened. I greeted the loan officer, Mr. Griffin, a man who'd once helped Belle and her husband secure their mortgage years ago. He remembered me immediately. "Still keeping the place in good shape?" "Mrs. Barfield?" he asked. "Always," I replied. Then I opened the mortgage folder and went straight to the point. "I'd like to review the cosigner clause and confirm my step-in rights." He looked a little puzzled, but he printed the contract anyway. We sat side by side as he highlighted the paragraph confirming I had the authority to assume payments if defaults occurred. "That clause is still valid," he said. "You've covered 3 months in the past. They're all logged." I asked for a stamped copy of my request and made sure the word received appeared in blue ink at the bottom. The highlighter left a yellow stripe across the text, bright as sunlight, unmissable. That single line meant leverage, not revenge. A lever is only dangerous when pulled in anger, and I had no intention of losing my balance. I slipped the page into its tabbed section. Mortgage, active, back home. I turned my kitchen table into an evidence station, scanner on, files ready. The machine whirred softly as I scanned the stamped documents into a single folder labeled 2024-0522 Bank HOA Mortgage. I uploaded it to the cloud, emailed myself a copy, and wrote a brief entry in my notebook. 3 actions completed, boundaries established. I checked each off with a red pen. Then I placed all the physical folders into my fire-safe box, spun the lock, and texted Clara, "Home safe. Everything fine." She replied with a heart emoji, and I smiled at the simplicity of it. The evening settled in warm and quiet. I lit a single candle on the kitchen table and watched the flames sway. "No cake this time, just light," I whispered softly. "I'll protect the twins and myself with paperwork." Then I set a calendar reminder on my phone for Friday. Review account confirmations before the weekend. The house smelled faintly of wax and lemon polish. I turned off the lamp, let the candle burn itself out, and stood there for a moment longer. Not sad, just aware. Some doors close with a click, others with a signature. Either way, silence makes the sound last longer. The email came through just after lunch. A short, polite notice with a subject line that looked harmless enough. Account access review, 05/29/2024. My stomach tightened before I even clicked it. The body of the message was crisp and procedural, written in that neutral tone banks use when they're about to ask you to prove you still know what you're doing. Review scheduled. Wednesday, 2:55 p.m., 3:15 p.m. Conference room 3. Attendance required. I printed the email, slipped it into my joint folder, and set my watch 5 minutes fast. Control the clock. Control the nerves. That was the habit I carried over from years in the ICU. I texted Clara, my neighbor, heading to the bank, "I'm fine." Then I tucked my folders into my tote, locked the house, and drove the familiar 10 minutes into town. The same roads, the same coffee shop on the corner, only this time, the errand wasn't about money. It was about boundaries. The branch lobby was cool and bright, the kind of clean that smells faintly of toner and carpet shampoo. A young receptionist led me into a small glass-walled conference room. Inside sat the branch manager, a careful man in his 50s with a tie too tight for his comfort. On the screen in front of him glowed a muted Zoom window labeled Compliance. I placed my 3 folders, joint, HOA, mortgage, on the table in a straight line. My phone lay face down, do not disturb mode on. The wall clock ticked toward 3:00. A red placard beside it read, "Recording prohibited." I found that almost funny. The same world that had turned everything into video now wanted silence. I sat with my hands folded, steady, breathing in through my nose and out through my mouth, just like I used to before difficult family meetings at the hospital. Then the door opened. Belle walked in fast, heels clicking, eyes glassy from lack of sleep or too much caffeine. She didn't look at me when she sat. "Thanks for fitting me in," she said to the manager, then nodded toward the screen. "This is urgent." She launched right into it. "My mom's confused," she said, her tone halfway between concern and performance. "We've had a long-standing family agreement. I handle her bills when things get overwhelming." She slid a few papers across the table, unpaid notices, maybe, printed for effect. She closed the joint account without understanding the implications. "There's a household emergency. I just need temporary access to transfer funds for the twins' medical needs." The branch manager glanced at me, then back to her. The compliance officer cleared her throat. Belle's voice softened, almost trembling. "It's really just a mistake. She's not herself lately." Still, she wouldn't look me in the eye. I didn't interrupt. My hands stayed clasped, palms cool. Let her fill the air. I'd learned that silence can make truth more visible. When she finally paused, I opened the joint folder and began to slide one paper at a time across the table. "Stamped closure confirmation, May 22nd, I said quietly. "Doorbell cam time log, May 19th, 6:12 p.m. Text message, May 21, stating boundary acknowledgement. HOA access revocation receipt. Mortgage clause highlight with receive stamp. And finally, my physician's capacity note from last month's checkup." The compliance officer leaned closer to her camera. "Mrs. Barfield, can you confirm this is your signature on all documents?" "Yes, ma'am." "And you understand the implications of these account actions?" "Completely." The air felt tight for a moment. The only sound was the wall clock, ticking through seconds that felt deliberate. I kept my tone even, almost clinical. I remain competent. I choose to manage my funds myself. The compliance officer looked at the manager. "All verified?" she said. The man nodded, typed a few lines, and hit print. The printer in the corner whirred softly. When he slid the single-page summary across the table, the first line read, "Request denied." Belle's shoulders tensed. The color rose up her neck. "You'll regret this," she whispered, just loud enough for me to hear. She gathered her papers too fast, scattering one across the floor before snatching it up. Her heels struck the tile as she left, already speaking into her phone before the glass door had even closed behind her. I stayed seated until the Zoom window blinked out. The branch manager offered a polite smile. You handled that professionally. Ma'am, I've had practice, I said, tucking the outcome summary into my tote. The red stamp on the corner read, completed, 05/29/2024, 3:09 p.m. When I stepped into the lobby, the hum of the printer and the chatter of tellers felt oddly comforting. Normal life moving on. I adjusted the strap on my tote and paid a few dollars for a notary stamp for my own records. I took a sip from the water cooler, texted Clara, done. All good. Through the glass, I saw Belle in the parking lot, phone still at her ear, walking fast toward her car. I didn't follow her with my eyes. I just noted the time, 3:12 p.m., back home. I opened my laptop and scanned the summary into a folder labeled 2024-05-29 Hearing Denied. I watched the progress bar crawl across the screen until it turned green, then closed the lid. On my desk, I placed a blank envelope and wrote across the front in steady block letters, for the kids. Beneath it, a sticky note. If accusations escalate, call Dr. Merritt for capacity letter reissue. I leaned back in my chair, the late afternoon sun sliding across the room in thin golden lines. For the first time in weeks, I felt the ground under me stay still. The house creaked softly, the way old houses do when they're exhaling. I whispered to no one. 7 minutes, one decision. Then I smiled, small, private, the kind of smile that isn't for victory but for peace. I set the envelope on the kitchen table and steadied my hand. Thick ivory, addressed in my neat block letters, for the kids. I filled the check to the school district's student support fund, earmarked under both twins' names. On the memo line, I wrote, counseling plus school lunches. Beneath the check, I slid a short note I had rewritten 3 times until no heat remained. This is the last check you'll ever cash in my name. No sermon, no scolding, just a border drawn in ink. Copies went into my file, dates stamped. I photographed the contents, then sealed the flap and pressed it flat with the side of my palm. My breath was even, tender, but firm. I wasn't punishing the children. I was choosing a cleaner lane to help them without feeding the fire that kept burning down my boundaries. Dusk sat soft over Round Rock when I backed out of the driveway. I took the quieter streets, the ones with crepe myrtles that shed like confetti. At the community USPS box I parked, checked the time, and snapped a single photo of the dash clock, 5:42 p.m., then another of the envelope resting on my lap. I slid it into the outgoing slot and listened for the small metal click as the lid fell shut. That sound landed in me like a latch catching. I drove past Bell's Street without slowing. Porch lights were flicking on, and a sprinkler misted the air into a pale rainbow over the sidewalk. No knocking, no doorstep theater. I turned at the next corner, circled back to the main road, and headed home with the radio low and the windows cracked to let out the scent of paper and glue. The text arrived as I set my keys in the bowl. We needed cash, not your conditions. Belle wrote. The bubbles kept pulsing, then stopped. I took a screenshot, titled it S7 and last check, and dropped it into the day's folder with a single tag, boundary. I did not reply. I poured water into the kettle and set it on the burner. The kitchen settled into that evening hum, refrigerator, clock, far-off traffic, while the hard edges inside me rounded out. The phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Adult Protective Services, the caller ID said. I answered and steadied my voice. The caseworker introduced herself, gave a badge number and a case ID, then read a short script. They'd received an anonymous report about my confusion and financial risk. I asked for her callback line and repeated the case ID as I wrote it on my legal pad. I can email documentation within the hour, I said, and you may visit in the morning. We kept it courteous. I confirmed my address, medications, emergency contacts. When we hung up, I set the kitchen timer for 15 minutes and began assembling the packet. physician's capacity note, scanned, pharmacy refill records attached, bank hearing outcome summary, added, copies of the joint account closure, the HOA fob revocation, and the mortgage clause request, stacked, squared, scanned. I compressed the PDFs and renamed the folder APS 2024-0531. My cover letter was clinical and brief. Dates, actions, confirmations, and a closing line. I remain able to manage my affairs and will cooperate fully. I sent the email to the secure address the caseworker read out twice. An automated acknowledgement returned in seconds. I printed it and laid it on top of the packet, then loaded everything onto a thin silver tray like I was prepping a bedside handoff. Sleep was steady that night. At 8 sharp, the caseworker knocked. I checked the peephole, opened the door, and invited her to the kitchen. She showed her badge. I showed my ID. We sat at the table with the folders between us like good fences. She asked linear questions, the kind that test for drift. I answered in plain sentences. She glanced at my pill organizer, at the blood pressure cuff, at the tidy row of labeled files. She took the packet, tapped on her tablet, and called her supervisor from my phone on speaker with my consent. She verified the case number against my email, asked 2 final orientation questions, and noted the condition of the home. Back at the table, she smiled in a way that let air into the room. "No concerns. Your case will be closed today." I nodded once and walked her to the door. The house felt taller as she left, as if the walls had pushed out again to their natural shape after being squeezed. By noon, the email arrived. APS case closed. No findings. I printed 2 copies, one for the fire-safe box, one for the working folder, and filed them with the others. I rinsed the kettle, set a fresh tea bag in my favorite mug, and watched steam curl up like a small white flag. Chamomile, calm and honest. I texted Clara a simple, "all good," and put my phone face down. On my desk calendar, I slid a yellow sticky into next week. Donor wall correction. Names matter. Credits matter. If the world ever forgot who kept the lights on, my records would remember. I turned off the desk lamp and sat by the window while the afternoon softened. Outside, a boy on a bike coasted past with a paper sack of tacos swinging from his handlebar. Somewhere, a dog barked twice and settled. I let the quiet have me. Air felt steady. This is what consequence looks like when you choose not to shout. A clear envelope, a closed case, a line that stays drawn after the ink dries. I didn't win anything dramatic. I didn't lose myself either. The kettle clicked as it cooled, and in that small sound I heard the shape of the days ahead. Measured, tidy, mine. The parking garage under the children's hospital smelled faintly of brake dust and hand sanitizer. I sat in the car for a minute, reviewing the folder on the passenger seat. The one marked in blue pen, Donor Wall Correction. Inside were the copies of my canceled checks, the original donation receipt, and a printed thread of polite emails with the foundation. The same yellow sticky from last week, Donor Wall Correction, peeked out from the edge. My phone was on Do Not Disturb. Out of habit. I rubbed the metal tag on my wrist that still bore my old ICU information. The words, blood type, O positive catching in the light. The elevator opened into a quiet corridor lined with color. Children's drawings framed between brushed steel plaques, butterflies, stick figure doctors, rainbows, all signed with the kind of handwriting that still believed everything could be fixed. The donor wall itself stretched 50 feet long, silver plates engraved with family names. My breath caught when I reached the G section. There it was, family, Gunnis, Belle's husband's last name, sitting exactly where mine should have been. The gift I had made last winter, redirected in someone else's title. A woman in a slate gray blazer approached, holding a tablet against her chest. "Mrs. Barfield, I'm Ms. Rivera from the Foundation office." Her tone was kind, but brisk, the way people sound when they want to help without making you feel pitied. I nodded and handed her the folder. "I think there's been a small miscredit," I said. "This was my donation." She scrolled through my receipts, scanning the QR sticker on the plate with her tablet. A soft beep confirmed it. "You're right," she said, lowering her voice. The family designation was updated incorrectly when the pledge form came through a third-party contact. I didn't have to ask who the contact was. I could guess. Ms. Rivera turned toward a maintenance tech waiting nearby, a young man with a microfiber cloth tucked into his pocket and a small ladder on wheels. "Let's correct this now," she said. I watched as he unscrewed the brass plate, careful not to scratch the surrounding wall. When the replacement came from the back room, it gleamed under the recessed light. Velma Barfield, plain, clean, final. Ms. Rivera smiled. "We'll update the online donor list as well. You'll get a confirmation photo by email." I thanked her. Steady voice, steady breath, no mention of Belle, no bitterness, just the correction of fact. The truth had found its label again. On the bench near the exit mural, a swirl of blue and gold tiles forming a sunrise, I sat for a few minutes, notebook on my lap. I wrote one line: "Credit is not applause, it's accuracy." Then I underlined it twice, before leaving. I set a calendar reminder to forward the confirmation to my accountant at tax time. Small order, right order. By noon, I was at Mr. St. Landry's office downtown. He'd been my estate attorney for years, pragmatic, polite, and good at reading silence. His office smelled faintly of old leather and copier ink. We sat across from each other while he spread out a yellow legal pad and clicked his pen. "All right, Mrs. Barfield," he said. "You mentioned a new trust structure?" "Yes," I replied. "For the twins, health, therapy, education only, payments go straight to schools, clinics, or counselors, no parental access." He nodded slowly, drawing columns on the pad: assets, beneficiaries, conditions. "So we'll create a sub-trust for each child, disbursements limited to verified third parties, reviewed annually." "Exactly," I said, "and a clause for mental health support. They'll need it. I want to make sure help is something they can reach without shame or manipulation." He turned on a small recorder with my consent. Let's talk language. Together, we shaped it carefully. A, annual therapy stipend with receipts from licensed providers. B, emergency coverage for counseling sessions. C, no cash disbursement to parents. D, periodic reviews at ages 13 and 16. E, release at 25, contingent on a basic financial literacy course. Each word mattered. We worked quietly, like surgeons, cutting away what didn't belong. When the draft was printed, I initialed every page. The notary came in, a woman with reading glasses and a steady stamp. The seal pressed into the paper with a low, satisfying thump. Landry handed me the final copy in a manila folder. "You're protecting them well," he said. "It's what's left to do," I answered. At the front desk, I authorized the wire transfer. The funds left my account with a faint digital chime, and within seconds, the trustee's confirmation email arrived. Transfer received. Trust active as of June 4th, 2024. I printed that message and slid it into the folder labeled S10 Grandkids Trust 0604. Outside, the Texas sun hung high over the courthouse square, lighting up the clock face on the tower. It was one of those moments when the world looked ordinary again. No legal terms, no emails, just time passing in the right direction. I thought of the twins, braces, field trips, after-school snacks, and felt something I hadn't felt in months, relief that didn't depend on anyone's permission. I did not call Belle. I didn't need to. Some messages don't belong in words. Back at home, I opened my planner, peeled a new sticky note and wrote neatly, "Locks, utilities, keys, June 6th. Then I set it just below the one that said, "Trust, active." The afternoon light stretched across my desk, warm and forgiving. For the first time, my name and my intentions were both in their right places, on the wall, in the record, and in the trust. The sticky note from Tuesday sat at the top of my planner, locks, utilities, keys. I read it once over coffee, then again as the kettle cooled, letting the words choose the day for me. 2 folders waited on the table, property and utilities, edges aligned like hospital charts. My phone stayed on Do Not Disturb with my neighbor on bypass. I slid 2 spare batteries into my pocket for the doorbell camera and tucked a small notebook into my tote. I wasn't angry. I was simply finished asking for doors that did not open. The locksmith's van turned onto my street at 9:14, white paint, sun-faded logo, license number taped inside the windshield. I stepped onto the porch as he parked. "Morning, ma'am. Derek," he said, showing a badge and a clipboard. I wrote the van plate in my notebook and held the screen door while he unpacked brass cylinders onto a folded towel. "Deadbolts with restricted keyways, please," I said. 2 sealed spares, stamped "Do Not Duplicate." He nodded the way people do when they recognize a customer who knows what she wants. He worked quietly, front door first, then the back, then the garage, vacuuming out metal shavings as he went. We spoke in the language of errands, weather, pollen, the way Texas summers sneak up the first week of June. Each new cylinder turned with that crisp, soft click I've always loved, the sound of something seating properly. At 10:21, he handed me a small envelope holding the spares, each in its own sleeve. "Test them all," he said. I did, one by one. Then watched him stamp the invoice paid and sign his name in clean block letters. I scanned the invoice with my phone, saved the PDF, and slid a paper copy into the property folder. Inside, I pulled a wide ceramic bowl to the counter and began a simple audit. Old keys, gathered from drawers and hooks, clinked like coins. Garage, back gate, mailbox. A duplicate I didn't remember approving. I labeled a mason jar in neat block letters, retired Euro 6, Euro 6, and poured the keys in. It sounded like setting down worry. On a white sheet of printer paper, I placed the new set and took a single photo. That file would go into a folder called S11 Locks. No speeches, only signatures and proof. Next came the utilities. I opened my laptop and signed into the electric portal. Account holder, me only. Password, new, 2-factor authentication, on, codes sent to my P.O. box email. Not to any phone I didn't carry. I printed the confirmation page and slipped it into the utilities folder. Water was next. I asked the representative to add a note. No third-party changes, without photo ID presented in person. She read the sentence back to me and added an alert for unusual activity. Gas followed. I removed all authorized users and asked for a move order lock so nothing could be shut off or moved without me. The portal spit out 3 short strings of numbers. Proof of changes. I printed each and stacked them left aligned. Insurance and mail were the paper shields. I called my home insurance agent and asked to be listed as the sole policy owner. "No claims without my approval," I said, and heard the keys clacking as she added the note. The endorsement came through as a PDF, with my name spelled correctly. I saved it to a directory named S-Joif, Utilities Insurance, and printed a copy. Then I set up USPS informed delivery, took a quick selfie for identity verification, and activated a rule to flag forwarding requests. It felt like locking a file drawer after years of leaving it cracked open out of habit. By mid-afternoon, the light had shifted across the front steps. I brought the doorbell camera inside, popped the back, and replaced the batteries I'd pocketed that morning, outside again. I reset the angle so it caught only my porch and driveway. Neighbors deserve peace, too. I pressed the button and watched the test clip on my phone. The chime, the frame, the date, and timestamp stacking in the corner. I saved the file as cam test 06061512 and wrote one line in my notebook. Footage kept 30 days. Pull if harassment occurs. The note wasn't a threat. It was a reminder that preparation is kinder than panic. There were 2 errands left, both small, both important. I walked next door with a sealed spare key and handed it to my neighbor, the woman who has watered my ferns when I've had early appointments. "Emergencies only," I said. She placed it in her freezer safe with a nod that meant more than words. On my way back, I set the second spare in my safe deposit envelope, ready for my next bank visit. At the dining table, I logged both recipients, date, and time. The line looked clean in ink. No crossings out, just the record of a promise kept. Evening came on steady. I locked each door once more, testing the muscle memory, the reach, the turn, the gentle pull. My house answered like a well-trained heart. Peppermint tea steamed into the quiet kitchen. I opened my journal and wrote a single sentence. "A door is a promise you keep to yourself." Then I closed the book and slid tomorrow's list beneath a ceramic mug so it wouldn't wander in the night. The keys, new and warm from my hands, lay in a row on the counter, bright as coins and quiet as vows. Before bed, I added 2 reminders. Check utility portals in 30 days. Review the camera archive each Sunday night. I did not call Belle. Boundaries don't need an audience. I set the alarm, laid out walking shoes, and slept. I exhaled once, steady and light, and let the house rest. Saturday began with the kind of quiet that lets a person hear her own decisions. My phone held one new voicemail, the HOA office asking me to call about a visitor complaint. I replayed it twice at the kitchen counter and wrote the case number inside the little square I'd already marked for the week. Property folder in my tote, a blank USB drive in my pocket, do not disturb still on with my neighbor in bypass. I rinsed my mug, locked the door once, then again out of habit, and drove toward the clubhouse. The HOA office smelled like printer paper and lemon cleaner. I gave my ID, the case number, and a time window, June 6th, 1:50 to 2:20 p.m. A young technician in a blue polo walked me to a counter with a monitor and mirrored my doorbell feed onto their system. "We'll archive your clip and give you a copy," he said. We watched in a hush that belonged to libraries and airports. At 1:57, Belle stepped into frame, tried the new deadbolt, waited, tried again, then pressed her face close enough to fog the lens. The technician logged no damage, repeated attempts, and burned a copy to my USB. He slid me an intake form stamped received. I thanked him and kept my voice even. In the parking lot, I sat with the windows cracked and filed the clip the way a nurse files vitals. S13 footage 0608, summary emailed to myself. A 1-page incident log printed later at home. Report or restrain. I chose to hold formal complaint in reserve. I set a 2-week reminder and drove home by the long road with the pecan trees. Preparation is not revenge. I told my breath, it is simply a railing you hold when the stairs are slick. Sunday brought the church potluck, one of those afternoons when the hall smells like coffee and casseroles and copy paper. I set my pan of baked ziti near the end where the kids can reach. When Belle arrived, she came late. Laughter half a block ahead of her, friends flanking like parade marshals. She swept past my table, thanked the village into the microphone, and kept her eyes moving everywhere but where I stood. A deacon, steady as rain, redirected her to the far side of the room. I served plates, refilled water pitchers, and kept my face neutral. The sting landed but did not spread. A hand landed gently on my sleeve. Mrs. Alvarez, the alto who never misses a downbeat, leaned in so only I could hear. "Dignity travels farther than noise," she said, and slipped me a bulletin with her number circled. I set it in my purse beside a pen and a peppermint, An anchor does not ask the tide to be kind. It decides where to live. Monday returned me to desks and paper. At Mr. Manid Landry's office, we drafted a letter with a heading long enough to do its own work. Notice of intent to exercise cosigner rights. We listed dates, clause numbers, and a clean cure window. Businesslike, not barbed. He printed 2 copies on heavy letterhead. I initialed each page, signed the last in blue ink, and sealed one envelope marked "Hold for Trigger." It went into the fire safe with the others. We were not pulling the lever. We were making sure it existed. Back home, I hardened the perimeter you cannot see. Experian, TransUnion, Equifax, credit freezes set, pins generated and stored in my password vault. I added bank alerts for withdrawals over a modest amount and enabled a fraud lock with my mobile carrier. Each confirmation page printed and laid in the S16 freezes SOGO 609 folder. Edges squared. I didn't find joy in it. I found air. Late. After the day cooled and the neighbors' sprinklers whispered. I stood at my window with the lights off. The unmailed notice sat in the fire safe like a held breath. I set a calendar alert tied to the mortgage due date and wrote a single line in my journal. If the numbers slip, the lever moves. Then I closed the book, set the pen down, and let quiet take the rest of the night. On Tuesday, I replayed the HOA clip once by myself. There was my porch, my new lock, my daughter's impatience fogging the glass, then her shoulders tightening as the deadbolt refused to remember her. I didn't send the video to anyone. Proof is strongest when it isn't brandished. It's kept. I labeled the USB with a strip of masking tape and slid it into a small tin with other labeled things: spare batteries, a microfiber cloth, the card for the technician in the blue polo. I made tea and carried the mug to the nearest chair. The church bulletin waited where I'd left it. I texted Mrs. Alvarez a thank you and a weather report, nothing more. She replied with a small heart and the words, "Sing when you can." I am not much of a singer, but I hummed the hymn we always close with when the seasons turn, and my chest loosened enough to let the air round its corners. Outside, a delivery truck idled, then moved on. Inside, the house did what houses do when you ask it to be yours. It held before bed. I opened my planner and checked the next 3 squares. No courtroom entries, no speeches, no audience. Just a list made of ordinary verbs: review, verify, renew. Quiet is not the same as surrender. It is a form of spine. Velma Barfield, cosigner, last 4 digits 8291. I recited from memory. They verified my identity, read a disclaimer, and opened the file. I requested that a notice of intent to exercise cosigner rights be logged on record. The representative hesitated, then typed. I heard the keystrokes, my favorite kind of music. I explained my history, 8 payments I'd covered last year, all documented. Understood. Ma'am, he said. I'll issue a case ID and supervisor callback window. The number arrived in my inbox 5 minutes later. S17-0617 AUSTX. I wrote it on a yellow sticky and tucked it into the folder. At noon, I called Mr. Landry. We finalized the letter together: arrears, late fees, and a clean 10-day cure window. Keep it procedural, I said. No adjectives. He smiled through the phone. My favorite kind of letter. I signed the final version under his notary stamp. Felt the embossed seal press against the paper. 3 copies, one for the servicer, one for the borrower, one for my records. The certified mail green cards went into a small dish on my desk, ready for pickup by 4. I sat parked on Bell Street. The process server walked up her driveway, document in hand. From my car, I could see the paper's blue tape corners flutter once, then settle against the door. My dash cam blinked red. A moment later, the server turned back toward the sidewalk, nodded once, and drove away. I texted Mr. Landry the time-stamped photo. His reply came within a minute. Filed. The ripple came faster than I expected. By evening, a neighbor forwarded me a PTA chat screenshot. Anyone know what that paper on Belle's door was? I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I archived the message, muted the thread, and brewed another cup of tea. My USPS informed delivery pinged. A mortgage notice headed to their box, marked default pending. I watched the small envelope image on the screen, then tapped archive. At 8:45, Mrs. Conson-Alvarez texted, "You did the hard, right thing." I answered with a single heart emoji. That was all it needed. Just after 9, my phone lit up again. 3 new voicemails from Belle. The first, sharp. The second, pleading. The third, slow and tired. Rage, bargaining, blame. The 3 stations of the same track. I didn't listen twice. I saved each, transcribed them into my day's log, labeled them by time, and forwarded copies to Mr. Landry's secure inbox. Euro 617, post notice. My handwriting stayed steady. Silence is not a wall, it's a choice of doorway. The next morning brought the call back from the servicer's supervisor. Her voice was crisp, practiced. "Ms. Barfield, your notice is logged and reviewed. Current options are as follows. 1. Cure in 10 days. 2. Submit hardship package. 3. Authorize cosigner, step in with repayment schedule." I asked for each clause in writing. By lunchtime, 3 PDFs arrived, each time stamped 11:42 a.m. I saved them in a new folder labeled S17 Scene Options 06 Wait and printed the first page of each. When I set the papers down, I noticed a new voicemail blinking. A man's voice this time. "Mrs. Barfield, this is Arthur. I'd like to meet privately. If you'd allow." Without Belle. His tone was weary, stripped of rehearsal. I didn't return the call. Not yet. The file drawer had its own rhythm, and I followed it. That night, I locked the documents in order, clicked the drawer shut, and turned the key twice. My planner already held 2 alerts. Day 7, verify status. Day 10, execute step-in if unpaid. Before bed, I wrote a single line in my journal. Dates are not threats. They're doors. I decide which one's open. Then I turned off the lamp, watched the blue light of the street lamps flicker across the ceiling, and let the quiet keep its watch. I chose the Austin Central Library because glass walls don't let lies hide long. The study rooms there have clocks that tick softly enough to keep a person honest. I reserved one for 30 minutes, sent Arthur the room number, and wrote mortgage. Options on a manila folder so there'd be no confusion about what this was. My phone sat face down on the table, the recorder app open and visible. I wasn't nervous, just ready. Arthur arrived 5 minutes early, hat in hand, shoulders bent under something heavier than the Texas heat. He looked around like a man scanning for exits before he even sat down. "Thank you for meeting me," he started. I nodded toward the chair across from me. "We've got 25 minutes. No raised voices, no guessing motives. Facts only." He took a breath, clasped his hands together. "I saw the notice," he said quietly. "Belle's not ready to talk without blame. But the kids, if we lose the house, we lose their school zone. They're already asking questions." His voice cracked once, but he caught it quick. I didn't interrupt. I listened the way I used to when patients tried to describe pain they didn't have words for. When he finished, he met my eyes and said, "I don't want money. I just need a route out." That was something I could work with. He asked for time, 2 weeks, maybe 3, to catch up. I kept my tone level. "Arthur, there are 3 levers in play." I said, "Cure, hardship package, or cosigner step-in with repayment. That's it." I let the silence settle so the words could find gravity. "And remember, the children's trust is funded. It's not for you or Belle." He nodded slowly, eyes down. like someone rereading a line that didn't change no matter how many times he tried. Then came the part I had to handle with both precision and mercy. I slid a printout across the table. Public records, LinkedIn timeline, HR notations. "I verify before I sign," I said, not accusing, just factual. His jaw flexed, his shoulders dropped. "I know," he admitted. "Attendance warnings, missed a recertification, left before they could write me up." He looked smaller in that moment, more human. I leaned back. "Can you document current income within 48 hours? He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I can." I opened the folder and placed a fresh sheet between us, 5 lines, typed clean and double-spaced. "Here's what I can agree to. Partial cure this week, funds verifiable and not from me. Hardship package submitted to servicer within 5 days. If I step in, it converts to a recorded lien. 2 arrears, and the move-out clause activates. Completion of a budgeting course and 2 counseling sessions. No direct contact from Bell. All communication routes through you and the attorney." He read it line by line, lips moving silently, then picked up the pen I'd set beside the paper. "This isn't a contract," I said. "Just acknowledgement of understanding." He nodded, initialed each bullet, and pushed the page back to me. We called the servicer from the stairwell outside the study room. Neutral ground, neutral tone. The same Loss Mit supervisor answered. We confirmed the hardship checklist and the temporary hold while Arthur gathered his documents. "No promises," she said, "just procedure." "That's all we need," I replied. I emailed Arthur the packet from my phone, CC'd Mr. Landry, and set an electronic receipt link. A minute later, a ping confirmed delivery. Facts first, emotions after. Down in the parking garage. The heat carried the smell of sun-baked concrete and dust. Arthur walked beside me until we reached the elevator. "Thank you for not yelling," he said. "I don't yell," I answered. "I sign or I don't." He smiled, tired but genuine. "I'll send the pay stubs tonight." I nodded once. "Good." The elevator doors slid open, and I stepped inside alone, through the glass. He looked smaller than when he'd arrived, but maybe a little straighter. In my planner, later, I wrote one line beneath the day's square. If he sends proof, a door cracks open. That evening, I brewed tea and opened my inbox. True to his word, the pay stubs had arrived, clean, current, time-stamped. I forwarded them to the attorney and servicer with a short note. Documentation received per terms. My phone buzzed again. Missed call. Bell. I didn't play the voicemail. Not yet. Some words are best heard when you've already decided what silence will cost. The library quiet from yesterday followed me home. I slept, rose before sunrise, and kept my walk. By mid-morning, the house felt like a church after service. Chairs pushed in, hymnals closed, air cool and clean. I made coffee, opened my notebook, and set my phone face up on the desk. A red dot hovered over Bell's name. Missed call. One voicemail, time-stamped 12:41, I let the mug warm my hands first. Then I tapped play with the recorder app open beside it. Screen dim, volume low. I watched the counter tick and kept my breathing even. Her voice arrived raw around the edges. "I know what I said," she began, and the words tumbled into a rush. She called the birthday line a joke that landed wrong, then admitted she'd repeated it to friends because she was worked up. She said the donor wall made her look small, that the church potluck felt like eyes, that neighbors were reading that paper on our door. In the same breath, she told Arthur to claim identity theft if anyone asked about the late notices. "Mom is useful when she's paying, impossible when she's not," she said, the sentence slanting into a sob. She ended with, "Fix it, or I'll make sure everyone knows you're cruel," and hung up on herself. Procedure is how I keep my peace. I exported the MP3, saved it to a folder labeled S22 with the date, generated a transcript with timestamps, and forwarded both to Mr. Landry with the HOA case number in the subject line. In my phone, I set her contact to route straight to voicemail. I opened a fresh log page and wrote, "No replies, counsel only." On the next line, I added a reminder to walk at noon. A body needs movement when a mind wants to replay tapes. By afternoon, Mr. Landry confirmed the HOA hearing would proceed that evening in the community room. The agenda listed Belle's complaint, harassment, lockout, and the exhibits we had already queued. My doorbell clip from June 6th, the HOA's mirrored copy, the locksmith invoice, the utilities confirmations. We agreed on our posture, 0 speeches, facts, chain of custody, dates, signatures. I packed a slim binder, slid a highlighter into the spine, and left early enough to find a chair near the back wall. Folding chairs made a square around a long table. The air smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and copy paper. A few neighbors drifted in with polite nods, the kind Texans give when they know the weather and the business both. The chair called us to order. Belle arrived late, cheeks high with color, phone clutched like a lifeline. She told a story about being shut out of her mother's house, about targeting and control. I kept my hands laced in my lap. When the chair turned to our side, Mr. Landry stood, stated our exhibits by letter, and asked to play the footage. The room watched the door handle rattle, watched it again from the HOA's angle, and then read the locksmith invoice and the utilities confirmations. No raised voices, just timestamps. The chair spoke plainly. Owners may change locks. Courtesy is advised. Permission not required. The complaint is unsubstantiated. A gavel tap, light as a teacup on a saucer, ended it. I said one sentence, "Thank you for reviewing the facts," and closed my binder. Belle stared at me as if waiting for a speech I no longer owed anyone. I met her eyes long enough to acknowledge a human being, and then looked to the chair for dismissal. In the hallway, a neighbor murmured, "Paper tells the truth, doesn't it?" and studied the floor tiles as if the grout might answer. I let the comment pass like a breeze. Mrs. Alvarez found me by the water fountain and squeezed my arm. "You stood still and the storm passed," she said. I smiled, the small kind that belongs to quiet victories, and walked outside with my binder held close. The evening heat had settled over the parking lot like a blanket. Cicadas stitched the edges of the hour with their steady sewing. Back home, I put the binder on the desk and opened the servicer email. A supervisor confirmed receipt of Arthur's pay stubs and the hardship packet. A temporary hold would remain in place 3 days while they verified the numbers. No promises, only steps. Mr. Landry sent a draft of lien language should I need to step in. It was simple, legible, and cold as a ruler. I printed 2 envelopes and labeled them with a felt-tip pen, if cure posts and if cure fails. I slid the appropriate drafts into each and set them side by side in the fire-safe tray. I made tea and carried the mug to the window. Across the alley, a boy practiced basketball alone, the hollow thump a metronome against the dusk. I thought of the twins, learning long division at the kitchen table, and of braces and permission slips and school lunches that never ask children whose name bought the milk. My phone pulsed once with a new voicemail from Belle. I did not press play. The file would wait beside the others, and I would not chase it. I wrote one line in my journal. I don't need an apology to keep my peace. I need my paperwork to keep my home. I set 2 calendar alerts. Day 2 to confirm the servicer's receipt. Day 3 to choose an envelope. A sticky note on the monitor read, "Numbers decide, not anger." I placed the voicemail transcript atop the binder, clipped to the hearing summary, and locked the drawer. Before bed, I laid out walking shoes, filled my pill organizer for morning, set do not disturb, neighbor on bypass. I said a prayer that sounded mostly like gratitude and sleep. At 8 sharp, the wall clock ticked loud enough to feel like breath. The servicer hold would expire at noon. I sat at the kitchen table with my ledger open to June 24th, the ink still neat from last night. On the counter, 2 manila envelopes waited, one labeled Step In, Lien and Sale. The other Release, No Action. I opened the laptop, logged into the mortgage portal, and saw the numbers just as I expected them. Partial payment received. Still 1 installment short. I poured my coffee, exhaled once, and dialed Mr. Landry. The clock's second hand swept past the 12. The loss mitigation supervisor picked up on the first ring after hold. "Yes, Ms. Barfield," she said. "Hardship received, partial cure posted, still delinquent." Her tone was all business. "Acceleration review begins at 12:001 p. Unless full reinstatement or cosigner step-in is processed." I asked for wiring instructions and an updated quote good through 2 o'clock. The email arrived while we were still on the line. I printed it, stapled it to the step-in packet, and underlined the total. When we hung up, I didn't think of blame or forgiveness, only decimals, routing numbers, and signatures. By mid-morning, Mr. Sam Landry arrived with the draft agreement we'd shaped over the past week. The consent to step in and listing terms fit neatly onto 3 pages. Together, we reviewed every clause. Repayment secured by a recorded lien. The property to be listed within 10 days unless refinanced by July 25th. A move-out deadline of August 1st if payments failed again. Counseling and budgeting proof still required. Communication routed only through Arthur. No exceptions. "Ready?" he asked. I nodded, pressed the pen tip to the first line, and signed. The notary seal clicked shut with a sound that carried finality but not malice. At 10:32 a.m., I authorized the wire transfer. The confirmation tone was soft, almost polite. I forwarded the proof to the servicer. Landry filed the lien and uploaded the signed consent Arthur had e-signed at 9:43. 2 minutes later, the servicer replied, "Reinstated, acceleration canceled." I slipped the stamped pages into the step-in envelope and sealed it with my thumb. One envelope left unopened on the table, marked Release, and I knew I would never need it. Justice doesn't always announce itself. It sometimes just clicks, sent. By 3, I stood in the driveway of the Round Rock property with the listing broker I'd vetted weeks before. The air smelled of cut grass and distant barbecue smoke. Arthur met us halfway down the walk, polite, subdued. Belle was absent. The broker outlined photos, minor repairs, an open house schedule. Arthur signed the exclusive right to sell under the consent clause. I signed as lien holder, acknowledgement only. 60 days, I reminded them both. No cash from me, only paperwork and dates. The broker penciled a yard sign install for Friday, her clipboard steady in the wind. That evening, I sent Arthur a list of vetted rentals and a contact from Mrs. Alvarez's church that handled temporary furniture banks. I forwarded the summer tutoring vouchers for the twins, funded months ago through their trust. He replied with 2 words, "Thank you." I read it once and archived the thread. Compassion, yes, but no reopening of accounts. Within a week, a solid offer landed. Inspection minor, appraisal clean, closing scheduled for late July. At the title office, the numbers rolled out in orderly rows. Arrears cleared, lien repaid, administrative fee accounted for. The remaining funds split to Arthur and Belle. I directed a portion into 2 new 529 plans for the grandchildren, already highlighted in yellow on my copy of the settlement sheet. I initialed each page, listened to the shuffle of papers, and felt a release that was more arithmetic than emotion. On the morning after closing, an email from Belle arrived. 2 sentences of apology, followed by a paragraph of self-defense. I read it once, forwarded it to counsel, and archived it without reply. In my call log, I wrote, "Apology received, no further action." I changed her contact name from root to VM to archive, counsel only. That small act felt like closing a drawer that had been stuck for years. A month later, I sat on the porch of a small hill country rental where the air smelled of cedar and slow forgiveness. The kids' school photos stood in simple frames beside my cup of tea. Mrs. Alvarez texted a picture of the church's furniture drive. I replied with a heart emoji and nothing more. The plant on my porch, the one I could never keep alive before, had sprouted a second stem. I watered it carefully, then wrote my last journal line of this story. Doors don't punish, they separate weather. Today I kept mine closed and opened the one that faces light. I turned my phone to Do Not Disturb, listened to the cicadas hum in the warm Texas dusk, and let peace finish the paperwork. As I close this chapter, here's what I know. Love without boundaries becomes debt, and paperwork is how dignity breathes in the real world. I didn't win by shouting. I won by dates, documents, and a steady heart. If your kindness is being used as a wallet, pause, write things down, and choose the door that protects your peace and the children. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to set a hard boundary with family? If this story touched you, drop a 1 or tell me the city you're watching from. Share this with someone who needs courage. Subscribe and enable alerts for more. Vex.